There comes a moment in life when silence becomes deafening. Not because the world is quiet, but because your heart has been holding its breath for far too long. You wake up one morning, and the air feels heavier. The laughter that once filled your home now echoes like a memory. You look in the mirror and realize it's not the wrinkles that frighten you. It's the weight of everything you've never let go of. The apologies you never said. The dreams you buried beneath responsibility. The love you gave to those who couldn't hold it. And suddenly, you understand, it's not time that ages you, it's attachment. But what if peace isn't something you need to find? What if it's been waiting for you all along, quietly,
Patiently.
beneath everything you refuse to release? Stay with me until the end of this story, because what you'll hear next might just change the way you see your entire life. If this message touches your heart, please subscribe to our channel, Buddhism in Every Moment, to support us in creating more inspiring videos that bring light, healing, and mindfulness to every soul. Part I, The Gentle Awakening. Understanding the weight we carry. There comes a moment in life when silence becomes deafening. Not because the world has quieted, but because something inside us has. Something that once burned brightly, but now flickers in exhaustion. You wake one morning, the light seeping softly through the blinds, and for reasons you can't explain, you feel a heaviness that no amount of sleep or coffee or conversation can shake. You move through the day as if carrying an invisible weight, a burden that others cannot see, yet it presses down on your very soul. That heaviness is not age. It is not time. It is everything we've gathered along the way. The unspoken regrets, the expectations we couldn't fulfill, the dreams that withered before they bloomed, and the masks we've worn for so long that we've forgotten the face beneath them. It's the weight of promises we never kept, the people we never forgave, and the endless search for meaning in all the wrong places. There is a quiet tragedy in growing older, not the fading of youth, but the accumulation of stories we never learned to release. Every smile we forced, every moment we swallowed our truth, every time we chose to carry what was never ours to bear. These become the invisible stones in our hearts. We often mistake endurance for strength. We believe that holding on makes us noble, that letting go means giving up. But what if the opposite is true? What if real strength is found not in how much we carry, but in what we are brave enough to set down? For years, society has taught us that peace is something to achieve, a reward earned after the storms have passed. But the Buddha once said, holding on is suffering. Letting go is freedom. Peace, then, is not a destination. It is what rises when the noise falls away. It is what remains when we stop fighting with life and begin to flow with it. Imagine sitting beside a lake at dawn. The water is perfectly still, yet beneath its surface lies the reflection of everything around it. Trees, clouds, mountains. The moment a single stone drops, the reflection shatters. The ripples distort what was once clear. Our lives are like that lake. The stones we throw, worry, attachment, expectation, disturb our stillness. And the older we grow, the more stones we've thrown. To find peace, we must learn to stop casting them. As the years pass, it's not our bodies that carry the greatest strain, it's our hearts. We carry resentment disguised as loyalty, guilt dressed as love, fear camouflaged as caution. We tell ourselves that we've accepted life, yet deep down, we're still negotiating with it, trying to rewrite what's already been written. But there comes a time, often quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day, when something inside us whispers, "You've carried enough." That whisper is not weakness. It is awakening. It is the beginning of the gentle surrender that leads to peace. The truth is, every soul has a breaking point, but before it breaks, it bends toward wisdom. Aging, at its core, is not decay, it's distillation. What remains after the illusions fall away is the essence of who we are. Beneath the layers of identity and memory, there is a timeless presence untouched by the years. You were never meant to become heavier as you grew older. You were meant to become lighter, wiser, freer, softer. There's a story about a monk walking through the crowded streets of Kyoto during a heavy rain. People hurried past, clutching their umbrellas, frowning at the sky. But the monk walked slowly, his robe soaked, his face serene. When asked why he didn't rush to seek shelter, he smiled and said, "Where can I go that the rain cannot reach?" The meaning is simple yet profound. Peace doesn't come from avoiding life's storms. It comes from realizing you were never separate from them. The same applies to the burdens we carry. Life will never be without its pain, but suffering is optional. Pain is what happens. Suffering is what we create by refusing to let go. To carry regret into every morning is to keep reopening a wound that has long wanted to heal. To cling to the past is to miss the beauty of the moment you are in right now. A moment that will never come again. Some people believe awakening happens in monasteries, during meditation, or through divine revelation. But more often, it begins in small, unnoticed moments. Washing dishes in a quiet kitchen, watching the sunset alone, or realizing, with sudden clarity, that what once mattered no longer does. It begins when the desire to hold on finally tires you more than the fear of letting go. Letting go is not an act of loss, it is an act of trust. Trust in life. Trust that everything you've experienced, the joy and the sorrow, the beauty and the mistakes, has shaped you perfectly for this moment. The lesson of age is not about what you can no longer do, but what you no longer need to do. Every season of life has its own wisdom. Youth teaches us how to chase, adulthood teaches us how to build, and age teaches us how to release. The tragedy is not that time passes, but that we resist its grace. We try to hold the river still, not realizing the flow is what keeps it alive. The art of living is not to fight the current, but to learn how to float, gently, fearlessly, with faith. When you finally understand that peace has been waiting beneath your struggle all along, a strange calm settles in. You stop chasing meaning and start living it. You stop asking, "We me?" and begin whispering, "Thank you." The heart that once felt heavy begins to breathe again. So as we begin this journey together, ask yourself, what are you still carrying that no longer belongs to you? Whose expectations, whose fears, whose pain? Because peace isn't something you'll find at the end of this story. It's something that's already within you, waiting for you to notice. This is the gentle awakening, not a thunderclap of enlightenment, but a quiet realization that the life you seek is already here. All that stands between you and serenity is everything you refuse to release. And if these words speak to something deep inside you, if they stir even a small spark of remembrance, then stay. Walk this path with me. Because what you're about to hear may not only lighten your heart, it may just change the way you carry your entire life. If this message touched your heart, please subscribe to Buddhism in every moment and help us continue creating more stories of peace, healing, and awakening for souls everywhere. Part 2. Let go of relationships that steal your peace. There is a certain ache that grows heavier with time, not in the bones or the back, but somewhere far deeper. It is the ache of carrying people who no longer walk beside you. The ache of keeping connections that drain rather than nourish. Of pretending that love must always mean endurance. We learn, often too late, that not every bond is sacred simply because it has lasted. Some were only meant to teach us not to stay. In youth, we mistake attachment for love. We call the constant need to please others compassion. We confuse silence for patience and self-abandonment for loyalty. But as we grow older, life begins to whisper truths we once ignored. One day, perhaps after yet another exhausting conversation that leaves your heart unsettled, you pause. You sense it, that invisible thread pulling away from your peace. You realize that holding on, just because you always have, is slowly dimming the light inside you. Peace cannot coexist with the constant noise of resentment. You cannot be at ease when you are busy rehearsing old arguments in your head or waiting for someone else to change so you can finally rest. Relationships are meant to help us evolve, not to imprison us in old versions of ourselves. Yet many of us stay in friendships that belittle, families that guilt, or loves that wound, because we are terrified of being perceived as cold, ungrateful, or cruel. But Buddhism teaches a deeper truth: love without wisdom becomes attachment, and attachment is suffering. Compassion does not mean self-sacrifice. To love purely is to wish for the happiness of another, but that includes yourself. True compassion has boundaries. It knows when to say enough with grace. Imagine standing in a garden surrounded by vines. Some climb beautifully toward the light, wrapping gently around your hands. Others grow thorns that pierce your skin each time you try to nurture them. You keep tending to both, hoping the thorned vines will soften, but they never do. One day, you realize that by clinging to the painful ones, you've stopped the healthy ones from blooming. That realization is not cruelty, it is clarity. Letting go of relationships that steal your peace is not an act of rejection, it is an act of preservation. It is choosing to breathe freely after years of holding your breath. It is saying to yourself, my peace matters too. There's an old teaching in Zen: if you let a bird stay in your hands too tightly, you kill it. If you open your hands too soon, it flies away unready. But if you learn the balance of your palms, both the bird and your hands are free. Balance, that is what mature love looks like. It does not demand ownership or apology for choosing stillness. It honors connection without creating chains. In the modern world, this lesson is perhaps harder than ever. We are taught that endurance equals virtue, that families must always remain close, that forgiveness means welcoming everyone back, no matter how many times they've broken us. But forgiveness is not the same as access. You can forgive someone and still choose distance. You can send love silently and still walk away in peace. There's a story often told in monasteries. A monk carries a woman across a flooded river to help her reach the other side. Hours later, another monk scolds him. You broke your vow by touching a woman? The first monk smiles softly and says, Brother, I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? We carry so many people in our minds long after they've left our lives. Their words echo in our thoughts. Their shadows haunt our peace. The mind becomes crowded with ghosts we refuse to release. To let go is to stop carrying what no longer exists. When you stop holding people in your heart as burdens, something miraculous happens. Space appears. Space for gratitude, for gentler memories, for new connections aligned with who you have become, not who you once were. You begin to see that every person in your life was a mirror. Some reflected your strength, others your wounds. Each one was a teacher in disguise. Perhaps you once gave your best to someone who never saw it. You tried, you explained, you softened, and still you were met with silence or criticism. There comes a moment when repeating the same cycle of pain no longer feels like loyalty, it feels like self-betrayal. That moment, painful as it is the first breath of freedom. It's not easy. Letting go never is. Sometimes it feels like cutting away a piece of yourself. But remember this: the love that is real will never ask you to shrink. It will never thrive on guilt, obligation, or fear. The relationships that steal your peace are not your home, they are your lessons. You might find yourself alone for a while after walking away. The silence may feel unbearable at first, but within that silence lies rebirth. In solitude, the soul finally exhales. You begin to rediscover what brings you joy, not the fleeting joy that depends on others' approval, but the quiet joy that comes from simply being. In recent years, many elders around the world have begun to share this truth. In small towns in Oregon, along the beaches of California, or in community gardens in New York, older men and women meet, not to gossip or compare, but to meditate, to paint, to plant, to simply exist together in peace. They say they no longer chase the company of everyone, only those whose presence feels like sunlight. Life, when lived wisely, becomes a garden of chosen connections, rather than inherited ones. You begin to recognize that some people belong to your history, not your destiny. You can bless them, wish them well, and still walk your own path with an open heart. The Buddha once said, "If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete." Too often we confuse compassion with compliance. We let guilt dictate our relationships. But guilt is a false teacher. It tells you to stay when your heart longs to leave, to give when your cup is empty. Real compassion understands that everyone must walk their own journey, that stepping away can sometimes be the most loving act of all. Ask yourself, who in your life drains you more than they uplift you? Whose presence makes you question your worth instead of affirming it? If you feel constantly anxious, small, or unseen in someone's company, that is your soul signaling imbalance. Listen to it. Your peace is sacred ground. Not everyone deserves access to it. There's another kind of relationship to release, the one we hold with our past selves. The versions of us that made mistakes, tolerated pain, or stayed too long because we didn't know better. Forgive those versions. They did the best they could with what they knew. Growth requires grace. Letting go of people also means forgiving yourself for having once needed them. The beauty of releasing is that life always fills the empty space with something purer. When you free yourself from the grasp of those who diminish your spirit, you create room for gentler souls to enter. Sometimes, that person is yourself. You meet yourself again, quieter, kinder, clearer. You start to understand what peace feels like not as a concept, but as a lived reality. In the silence that follows letting go, the world begins to sound different. The wind feels softer. The mornings carry a sweetness you hadn't noticed before. You start to find comfort in small things, a cup of tea, a walk alone, the laughter of strangers. That's how you know healing has begun, when you no longer crave what once hurt you. You were never meant to fix everyone. You were meant to love wisely. Love deeply, yes, but not endlessly at the cost of your soul. The most profound relationships in life will always be those that teach you to love without losing yourself. To release a toxic bond does not mean erasing it from your story. It means giving it its rightful place. It was a chapter, not the entire book. And when you close it with forgiveness rather than bitterness, the next chapter begins with lightness. There is peace in walking away quietly. There is dignity in choosing silence over argument, distance over drama. Not every goodbye must be loud. Some goodbyes are simply a deep breath and the courage to turn toward your own well-being. As the Buddha taught, you only lose what you cling to. When you understand this, even the word loss changes its meaning. What if losing someone who constantly steals your calm is actually finding yourself? What if the end of a painful connection is not the death of love, but the rebirth of clarity? And so, the next time you feel torn between your peace and someone else's approval, choose peace. The right people will never ask you to trade your soul for their comfort. Life, in its truest form, is a series of beautiful meetings and graceful departures. The goal is not to hold on to everyone you meet, but to love fully while they are here, and let them go with compassion when their part in your story is complete. One day, you will look back and understand that every goodbye was guiding you toward freedom. The faces that once brought you pain will soften into memories that no longer sting. The love you once sought from others will begin to rise from within. That is when you will finally understand. Letting go was never about losing people. It was about reclaiming yourself. And when you do, you will see that peace was never waiting at the end of the path. It was quietly walking beside you all along, just waiting for you to set down what you no longer needed to carry. Part 30. Let go of the fear of aging. There is a quiet morning when you wake, and for a moment you don't recognize the person in the mirror. The eyes are familiar, yet something in them has shifted. The light that once burned with urgency now glows softer, deeper, tempered by the years. You trace the faint lines near your mouth, the gentle silver threading your hair, and somewhere deep inside, a whisper rises. When did I begin to change like this? The truth is, we don't fear aging because of what it does to our bodies. We fear it because of what it reveals. How fragile time truly is. How fleeting our illusions of control have always been. In a culture obsessed with youth, growing older can feel like fading. Advertisements promise eternal vitality. Screens are filled with faces untouched by time. But beneath that glossy perfection lies a quiet deception, the idea that to age is to lose worth. And yet, in the stillness of reflection, another truth begins to unfold. Aging is not the enemy, it is the teacher. It strips away what is false, leaving only what is real. Every wrinkle is a record of laughter and tears. Every line is a map of survival, a silent testimony that says, I have lived. The fear of aging is not born from time itself, but from comparison to who we once were, or to what the world tells us we should be. But what if you saw aging not as decline, but as refinement? What if every year was polishing the soul, revealing the light that youth was too restless to notice? There was once a woman who lived near the shores of Lake Tahoe. Every morning, she would walk to the edge of the water just as the sun rose, her breath visible in the crisp air. She was well into her 70s, her steps slower now, her joints less forgiving. But her face carried a serenity that no youth could imitate. One morning, a young traveler asked her, "Don't you miss the days when your body was strong and free?" She smiled, her gaze lingering on the rippling light across the lake. "My body may not move like it once did," she said, "but I can finally see what I used to rush past." That is the quiet gift of time, the transformation of sight. What once mattered so fiercely begins to soften. The race to be admired gives way to the peace of simply being. Aging, when embraced, becomes not a loss of vitality, but a gain of clarity. In Buddhism, impermanence, anicca, is not a curse, but a liberation. Everything changes. Everything passes. The flower blooms and withers, the river flows and dries, the body grows and fades. To fight this truth is to suffer endlessly. To accept it is to awaken. For what remains constant is not the form, but the essence, the light behind the eyes, the still awareness observing every transformation. Imagine a candle burning in the dark. The wax melts, the flame flickers, yet the light it gives, warm, golden, infinite, touches everything around it. The body is that candle. The soul is the flame. Aging only changes the shape of the wax, it cannot extinguish the light. The fear of aging often masks a deeper fear, the fear of irrelevance. We dread becoming invisible, unheard, left behind by a world that worships novelty. But this fear is born from illusion. The world does not forget the wise, it merely moves too quickly to notice them. And wisdom, like gravity, needs no applause. It simply holds everything together. Perhaps the true purpose of aging is not to stay visible, but to see differently. To notice the beauty that rush once blinded us to. To understand that value was never in how we looked, but in how we loved. To realize that the moments we once overlooked, a soft sunrise, a shared meal, a simple touch, were the ones that made life sacred all along. There is a saying in Zen: the snow falls, yet each flake knows its place. Aging is like that snow, gentle, inevitable, each stage of life landing exactly where it is meant to. The tragedy is not that we grow old, it's that we resist the grace of it. We cover our gray hair instead of admiring the silver wisdom it holds. We rush to hide the years instead of bowing to their lessons. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from craving, the craving to make things stay the same. But imagine how lifeless a world would be if nothing changed. If the trees never shed their leaves, they would never grow new ones. If the river never flowed, it would stagnate and die. To age is to move with life's current, not against it. And yet, society conditions us to fight the current. Anti-aging creams, cosmetic fixes, desperate diets, as though the natural rhythm of existence were something to be ashamed of. But the more we resist, the further we drift from peace. The path to serenity begins with gratitude. Gratitude for the vessel that has carried you this far, for the breath that still rises each morning, for the heart that has endured heartbreak yet continues to love. Aging is not a punishment. It is a privilege denied to many. Every new year is a miracle whispered softly by time, saying, "You are still here. You still have a chance to grow." Some people try to escape aging by clinging to youth, surrounding themselves with younger company, chasing trends, pretending not to feel the quiet ache of change. But what they truly long for isn't youth itself, it's aliveness. And aliveness is not bound to age. It blooms whenever we are fully present. There was an elderly man who once said, "I don't miss being young. I miss believing that time was infinite." But then he smiled and added, "Now I know it's not, and that makes everything more precious." That is the wisdom aging offers, the ability to love moments not for how long they last, but because they will not last. When you stop fearing age, you begin to taste the sweetness of impermanence. You realize that the end of one chapter is not the end of the book. It is the space between breaths, the pause that allows meaning to settle in. If youth is about expansion, age is about depth. The younger self looks outward for purpose, in careers, relationships, and success. The older self looks inward and finds that purpose was never lost. It was simply buried under noise. In your younger years, the world teaches you to chase. In your later years, life invites you to surrender. Surrender not as defeat, but as trust. Trust that the same force that turned you from child to adult, from dreamer to doer, will continue to guide you toward peace. When you release the fear of aging, something remarkable happens. Time begins to feel generous again. You no longer rush to capture moments, you let them unfold. You no longer measure your days by what you achieve, but by the grace with which you experience them. You learn to celebrate small victories, a morning without pain, a conversation that warms the heart, a night of deep sleep. There's a stillness that only age can teach, the art of being at peace with incompleteness. The young seek perfection, the wise find beauty in imperfection. A chipped cup, a scarred hand, a forgotten name, these are not flaws, they are poems written by life itself. The fear of aging fades when you stop identifying with the form and start identifying with the essence. You are not the face in the mirror, nor the number of your years. You are the awareness that has watched countless versions of yourself come and go, the child, the dreamer, the parent, the friend. You are the witness, the space in which every experience unfolds. In the end, to grow old gracefully is to grow transparent, to let the light of being shine through the cracks of identity. You stop pretending, stop proving, stop performing. You become simple again, like a mountain at dusk, silent but radiant, unbothered by the changing light. Aging is not the diminishing of life, it is its deepening. The body softens so the heart can open wider. The ambitions fade so the soul can rest. You begin to see that the wrinkles around your eyes are not signs of decay, but symbols of countless moments when you dared to feel joy, sorrow, wonder, love. The Japanese have a word, wabi-sabi, the beauty of things imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. It is the art of finding grace in what is weathered and worn. To live wabi-sabi is to live with acceptance, to understand that beauty and transience are not opposites, but partners in creation. In your final years, perhaps the greatest act of courage is not to fight time, but to thank it. To say, "Thank you for teaching me what matters. Thank you for giving me enough time to see clearly." If you truly look, you'll see that life was never about remaining unchanging. It was about learning how to love through every change. To let the body age, the memories fade, the voice soften, and still be able to whisper, this too is beautiful. So, when you stand before the mirror again, don't look for the person you used to be. Greet the soul that has carried you this far. Bow to the years, not with fear, but with gratitude. Because every moment that has passed has been a brushstroke in the masterpiece of your becoming. Let the young chase eternity. You, now, have found it, not in time, but in presence. You have become like the still lake that reflects the sky, unmoved by ripples, content in its depth. Aging, in its truest form, is not decay. It is awakening. It is the gentle unfolding of who you were always meant to be, timeless, luminous, and free. Part 4. Let go of comparison. There is a moment, quiet and unannounced, when you find yourself staring at an old photograph. The edges are worn, the colors faded, yet what grips you is not the image itself, it's the person staring back. That younger version of you, so full of energy, eyes wide with wonder, unaware of what was to come. And as you gaze, a subtle ache begins to rise. You whisper to yourself, almost unconsciously, where did that person go? It's a question millions of souls ask in the silence of their days. The body may still move, the breath may still flow, but somewhere along the journey, the brightness seems to dim. You measure today against yesterday and feel as though something precious has slipped away. That feeling, that quiet wound of comparison, is one of the most pervasive forms of suffering in human life. We compare endlessly, to our friends, to our neighbors, to the strangers glowing on our screens, and perhaps most cruelly, to the person we once were. The mind becomes a constant battlefield of used to, and should be. We measure our value by a standard that no longer belongs to us, as though life were a competition we never agreed to join. But comparison is not the pursuit of truth. It is the distortion of it. When the Buddha spoke of ignorance as the root of suffering, he was not referring to lack of knowledge. He meant blindness, the inability to see things as they truly are. Comparison blinds us. It creates the illusion of separation between us and others, between our past and present selves. We forget that all forms are impermanent, that everything, even our own identity, is a river constantly changing course. To compare yourself to who you were 10 or 20 years ago is to demand that the river flow backward. It's to ask the flower not to bloom, or the sunset not to fade. Life was never meant to stand still. It was meant to move, to transform, to evolve. And yet, we scroll through photos, hear stories of success, and feel a sting, a subtle whisper of, I should be there by now. The truth is, you are not behind. You are simply on a different part of the path. The mountain peak looks different from every angle, but it's still the same mountain. There's an old Zen saying, "The moon does not compare itself to the sun. It shines by its own light." When we learn to honor our own rhythm, our own timing, we begin to experience peace. Life stops feeling like a race and starts to feel like a dance, one where every step, whether swift or slow, has meaning. The danger of comparison is not only that it steals joy, but that it blinds us to the miracle of this very moment. You cannot appreciate your current season if your heart is forever longing for another. You cannot taste the sweetness of now if you're busy mourning the flavors of before. In our youth, we chase validation, the approval of peers, the admiration of the world. But as the years unfold, life gently reveals a quieter truth. The deepest form of validation is self-acceptance. When you stop looking outside for confirmation of your worth, you begin to sense an internal peace that no amount of praise could replace. Consider this: a tree never looks at another tree and says, "You are taller, so I am less." It simply grows according to its nature. Some trees reach for the sky, others spread wide, offering shade. Each fulfills its purpose without comparison. The oak does not envy the willow, and the willow does not resent the pine. In the same way, your journey is uniquely yours. Every joy, every heartbreak, every detour, all of it has sculpted a path that no one else could walk. But our modern world thrives on comparison. Social media is a marketplace of illusion, a parade of highlight reels that rarely reveal the hidden struggles behind the smiles. We scroll through images of youth, beauty, success, and mistake them for reality. And with every scroll, we silently measure ourselves against the unreality of others. We forget that even the most radiant sunset is still followed by darkness. The more we compare, the more we lose connection to the present. We become trapped in a loop of longing, longing for the body we once had, the opportunities we think we missed, the dreams we failed to pursue. But the truth is, comparison is always a distortion of memory. The younger self we idealize was never as carefree as we remember. It had its own fears, insecurities, and pains. You are not meant to be that person anymore. You are meant to evolve into the one you are now, softer, wiser, more grounded in truth. When we stop comparing, we begin to see life as a continuum, rather than a competition. The person you were and the person you are now are not rivals. They are collaborators in your becoming. Each version of you did its part to bring you here. The laughter, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, all of it was necessary for awakening. I once heard a story of an elderly painter in Santa Fe. When asked if he missed the energy of his youth, he said, "No. Back then I painted to prove something. Now, I paint to feel something." That is the quiet revolution of age, the shift from striving to being, from proving your worth to living it. To let go of comparison is to reclaim your peace. It is to look at your life not as a scoreboard, but as a landscape, one filled with valleys and peaks, storms and clear skies, all equally beautiful because they exist together. It's natural to look back, to remember what was, to wish you could recapture certain moments. But nostalgia can become a form of attachment if it blinds you to what still is. The present moment, though quieter, holds a richness that youth could not perceive, the kind of beauty that reveals itself only to a heart that has learned to see. In meditation, teachers often say, "Observe the breath, but do not judge it." The same can be said for aging, for life, for change. Observe, but do not judge. Breathe through the seasons of your existence. There is grace in acceptance. There is power in presence. If you find yourself longing for who you used to be, remember this: that version of you could not have survived the storms you've endured. The strength you carry now was born from everything that once felt unbearable. The person you are today is not less, they are more. More compassionate, more real, more awake. When you see someone younger running ahead, do not let envy steal your peace. Smile for them. Bless their journey. For one day, they too will stand where you stand now, humbled by time, softened by life, grateful for breath. Comparison dissolves in gratitude. The moment you say, "Thank you for this body, this day, this chance to still grow," you step out of competition and into harmony. In the quiet rhythm of gratitude, even aging becomes sacred. You start to see beauty in the lines around your eyes. They are proof that you've smiled, cried, and lived fully. You begin to see that your worth has never been measured by appearance or achievement, but by the depth of your awareness. To let go of comparison is to return home to yourself. It's to stand in the center of your life and whisper, "This is enough. I am enough." That whisper is liberation. That is peace. The moon does not compete with the stars. It simply reflects the light it receives, and that is enough. You, too, are not here to outshine anyone. You are here to illuminate in your own way, at your own pace. So the next time you catch your reflection and feel the sting of comparison, pause. Breathe. Instead of asking, "Why am I not like I used to be?" ask, "Who am I becoming now?" Let that question soften your gaze. Let it remind you that life is not measured by how closely you resemble your past self, but by how deeply you are living your present one. In the grand tapestry of existence, every thread, bright or dull, long or short, contributes to the whole. Yours is no less vital than any other. When you truly understand this, the need to compare dissolves like mist in morning sunlight. What remains is clarity, the gentle knowing that you are exactly where you're meant to be, becoming exactly who you were meant to become. And that realization, quiet and complete, is the beginning of freedom. Part V. Let go of the need for others to make you happy. There comes a quiet hour in every life when the noise fades, the phone stops ringing, and you are left alone with yourself. The television hums in the background, the clock ticks steadily, and the air feels both comforting and unfamiliar. It is in that silence that a question arises, softly but piercingly, what truly makes me happy? Most people spend decades trying to answer that question by looking outward. We search for it in the laughter of friends, in the comfort of family, in the validation of lovers, in the applause of strangers. We chase it through careers, through possessions, through fleeting moments of admiration. And yet, when the lights dim and the room grows still, we often discover that happiness built on someone else's presence is as fragile as morning dew. It glimmers for a moment, then disappears. The great illusion of life is that someone else will bring us peace. We are raised to believe that love will save us, that companionship will complete us, that the right person will finally make us whole. But wholeness cannot be borrowed, it must be reclaimed. What others can offer are reflections of what already lives within us: affection, understanding, companionship, but not the root of happiness itself. The Buddha said, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." At first, that truth feels harsh. It challenges everything we've been taught about connection and love. But within it lies the seed of liberation. To understand that your joy does not depend on the presence or approval of another is to taste freedom for the first time. In the small coastal town of Carmel, California, there lived an elderly woman named Lillian who had outlived her husband and most of her friends. Each morning, she walked to the ocean and watched the waves curl and crash, her eyes steady on the horizon. When asked if she ever felt lonely, she smiled and said, "Sometimes. But even loneliness is a kind of company. It reminds me that I am still here." She had learned something most people never do. Solitude is not emptiness. It is space. It is the room where the soul finally learns to breathe. When you depend on others for happiness, you hand them the key to your peace. You wait for their smile to lift your mood, their attention to validate your worth, their love to make you feel alive. But what happens when they walk away, or when they, too, are lost in their own storms? You are left stranded in a desert of longing, waiting for someone else to bring rain. Yet the truth is, the water you seek has always been within you. The practice of letting go of this dependency begins with awareness. Notice how often your emotions rise and fall based on someone else's behavior. Notice how quickly joy turns to sadness when a message goes unanswered, or how easily your mood darkens when someone forgets to call. Then ask yourself, why have I given my peace such fragile wings? Happiness is not a gift the world gives. It is a fire you tend. It is built in small, sacred moments, in gratitude, in presence, in the courage to sit quietly with your own heart. It grows when you stop demanding that others fill your emptiness and begin to fill it yourself, through creation, service, curiosity, or simply stillness. A monk once said, "You cannot pour tea into a full cup." When your mind is filled with expectations of others, how they should act, how they should love, how they should make you feel, there is no space for the simple joys of life to enter. But when you empty that cup, when you release the need for external approval, even the smallest things become luminous. The warmth of sunlight on your face, the scent of rain on dry earth, the soft hum of your own breath. It's easy to forget this truth in a world that equates connection with constant contact. We have mistaken companionship for validation. But connection is not about someone completing you. It's about two complete beings sharing their light. When you depend on others to make you happy, you place your soul in their hands, and no matter how much they love you, those hands will tremble. People are not gods. They will forget, falter, fail. They are mirrors, not makers of your joy. Consider the quiet strength of nature. The sun does not rise because we praise it, and the stars do not shine because we watch them. They exist in their own wholeness, radiating simply because that is their nature. What if we lived the same way, radiant without reason, content without condition? This doesn't mean isolating yourself from the world or denying your need for love and connection. Humans are meant to love deeply, to intertwine their lives with others, but the difference lies in attachment versus presence. Love with attachment says, "I need you to be happy." Love with presence says, "I share my happiness with you." One clings, the other flows. To cultivate inner happiness, you must learn the art of self-nourishment. Begin small. Sit quietly with a cup of tea. Walk without your phone. Write down 3 things that brought you peace today, no matter how ordinary. Speak kindly to yourself, not in grand affirmations, but in gentle acknowledgement. I am proud of you for showing up today. I am proud of you for trying again. Slowly, the relationship with yourself begins to heal, and happiness roots itself where it belongs, inside. The people who truly love you will notice this shift. They will see that you no longer reach for them out of need, but out of gratitude. They will feel lighter around you, because love that is free from dependency is the kind that breathes. It allows space for both souls to grow. In Buddhism, joy that arises from within is called piti, a bliss not dependent on external conditions. It is the joy of simply existing, of feeling alive in this fleeting, precious moment. It's the kind of joy that can survive loss, grief, or solitude because it does not depend on circumstances. It is rooted in awareness, watered by gratitude, and warmed by compassion. There was once a gardener who tended a small temple courtyard high in the mountains of Japan. He spent his days sweeping leaves, trimming bonsai trees, and raking patterns into gravel. When a traveler asked him why he worked so diligently, when few ever visited, he replied, "Because beauty is not made for witnesses. It is made for presence." He understood what so many of us forget. The act of care itself is a form of joy. We do not need an audience to live meaningfully. In the same way, your happiness is not validated by how many people see it, but by how deeply you feel it. You could spend your whole life waiting for others to notice your worth. Or you could begin right now to notice it yourself. Letting go of the need for others to make you happy also means releasing the belief that you are unworthy of your own company. The fear of loneliness often masks a deeper truth. We are uncomfortable being with ourselves because we have not learned to listen with compassion. We fill silence with distraction, as if stillness were a void. But stillness is not empty. It is full of life waiting to be heard. Sit quietly, and you will hear it, the soft hum of existence beneath your thoughts. That hum is peace. That hum is home. When you reach a point where your happiness is no longer fragile, relationships transform. Love becomes an offering, not a transaction. You begin to give not from lack, but from abundance. You stop measuring love by what you receive and start measuring it by the depth of your presence. Aging teaches this truth with gentle persistence. As people come and go, as faces fade into memory, you realize that peace cannot be outsourced. It must be built within, brick by brick, breath by breath. And when you finally find it, you stop chasing people who don't stay, stop blaming those who couldn't understand, stop waiting for the world to deliver something it never owed you. You simply start living, with a quiet joy that needs no witness. In the end, the goal is not to be self-sufficient in the cold sense of isolation, but to be self-rooted, so that when you do love, it comes from wholeness, not hunger. When you give, it is from fullness, not fear. The next time you feel empty, resist the urge to fill that space with another person. Instead, fill it with silence, with prayer, with gratitude. Sit with your emptiness until it transforms into stillness. Sit with your stillness until it transforms into peace. Because one day, you will understand what every awakened soul eventually learns. That happiness was never missing. It was simply waiting beneath all your searching. The love you sought from others was always a reflection of the love you forgot to give yourself. And when you finally stop waiting for someone else to make you happy, when you start tending your own inner garden with care, life itself begins to blossom around you. Not because you needed it to, but because peace attracts peace. So let this be your practice, to wake each morning and whisper, "I am enough." To walk through the world not needing, but radiating. To love others not because they complete you, but because they remind you of the completeness already within you. Part VI, let go of the idea that learning ends. There is a quiet and dangerous lie that the world whispers as we grow older. The belief that learning belongs to the young. That curiosity fades like eyesight. That new beginnings are for other people, that the door to discovery closes quietly when the calendar fills with years. We start to tell ourselves stories that sound like surrender. I'm too old for that. That part of my life has passed. I've already learned what I need to know. But the truth is simpler and infinitely more beautiful. The moment you stop learning is not when life ends, it is when your spirit begins to wither. The body may slow, but the mind, the heart, the awareness within you, was never meant to be static. Growth is not a privilege of youth, it is the very nature of being alive. Every sunrise that greets your eyes is a teacher. Every challenge, every conversation, every silence holds something new to reveal, if only you remain willing to see. The tragedy is not aging, it is hardening. It is mistaking what is familiar for what is final. There was a man in his 80s named Thomas who lived near the cliffs of Maine. For 40 years he had been a carpenter, his hands thick with calluses, his back bent from decades of labor. When his wife passed, he felt the world go dim. the workshop gathered dust. Days blurred into one another. One morning, while sitting on his porch, he watched the ocean waves and thought, "I've built all I can." But that afternoon, a child from the neighborhood brought him an old, broken violin and asked if he could fix it. Thomas hesitated, but something inside stirred, the simple invitation to mend. In the weeks that followed, he learned how to restore instruments, watching tutorials, fumbling at first, laughing at his mistakes. And when he finally drew the bow across the strings and heard the violin sing again, tears welled in his eyes. "It feels," he said softly, "like I am learning to live again." To learn is to be reborn. Every act of curiosity rekindles the light within. The moment we open ourselves to something unfamiliar, a new language, a new art, a new way of thinking, the world expands. And within that expansion, the soul breathes deeper. In Buddhism, the concept of shoshin, the beginner's mind, teaches that the wise approach each day as though it were the first. The beginner's mind is not naive, it is free. It is the mind that says, there is still more to see, even after a lifetime of seeing. It recognizes that wisdom is not accumulation, but awakening, the ability to look again, and again, and again, without arrogance, without boredom, without fear. The most profound learning often comes in forms we least expect. Sometimes it arrives not as new information, but as a deeper understanding of what we already knew. A lesson revisited, like a familiar song that suddenly means something entirely different because of the life you've lived since you first heard it. What once felt like knowledge becomes revelation. What once seemed simple becomes sacred. In a small monastery in Kyoto, there is an elderly monk named Haruto who has followed the same morning ritual for over 60 years, rising before dawn, sweeping the courtyard and brewing tea. When asked by a visitor how he avoids boredom in such repetition, Haruto smiled and said, "Because each morning, the tea tastes different." That is the essence of learning, not the pursuit of novelty, but the renewal of perception. Life itself doesn't need to change for you to discover something new. You only need to look more closely. Many people confuse wisdom with closure, as if to be wise means to have all the answers. But true wisdom is the opposite. It is the deep humility to admit that every answer reveals 1,000 new questions. It is the curiosity that outlives ambition, the wonder that remains when the noise fades. When you let go of the belief that learning ends, you reclaim a part of yourself that never aged, the child within. The one who once looked at rainbows and marveled, who asked why the sky was blue, who laughed freely at not knowing. That child never died. It only fell asleep beneath the weight of adulthood, beneath the illusion that knowing more means feeling less. And so the practice is not to chase more knowledge, but to reawaken wonder. To walk outside and let the world surprise you again. To feel grass beneath your feet, and remember how extraordinary it is that it grows at all. To taste your morning coffee as if for the first time, noticing how its warmth spreads like gratitude through your chest. Learning is not limited to classrooms or books. It happens in kitchens, in gardens, in quiet moments of reflection. You learn each time you forgive, each time you listen deeply, each time you choose patience over pride. Life is the greatest teacher, and it never stops offering lessons until your very last breath. I once met a woman named Sophia, who, at 78, decided to learn how to surf. Her grandchildren laughed when she told them. "Grandma, that's crazy," they said. She smiled and replied, "Maybe. But life has already called me crazy before. And it turned out fine." She fell 100 times that first month. Each fall left her bruised, but each rise made her feel alive. When she finally managed to stand on the board, even for a few seconds, she said she felt like a child again, not because she mastered something, but because she dared to begin. Learning does not always mean success. Sometimes it means unlearning, the art of releasing old beliefs, the courage to say, "I was wrong." We live in a culture that fears mistakes, that prizes certainty. But certainty is a small room, and no light enters there. Mistakes are the open windows through which wisdom breathes. The lotus, the most sacred symbol in Buddhism, blooms not in clean water, but in mud. Its petals rise unstained because it embraces its environment, not in spite of it. In the same way, our understanding blooms not from perfection, but from the messiness of living. Every hardship, every failure, every heartbreak is a classroom. The question is not, why did this happen to me? But what is life trying to teach me now? Sometimes the lesson is patience. Sometimes it is humility. Sometimes it is surrender. The curriculum changes, but the purpose remains to awaken. In the Western world, we often equate learning with productivity, studying to earn, training to advance, growing to achieve. But spiritual learning asks for something quieter, to learn simply for the sake of being more conscious, more kind, more present. It asks you to study not the world outside, but the world within. To notice how thoughts arise and pass, how emotions move through you like clouds, how peace is always waiting beneath the storm. The mind, like a muscle, remains alive through use. When curiosity fades, so does vitality. The elders who continue to learn radiate a different kind of youth, not of body, but of spirit. Their eyes carry a sparkle that says, "I am still amazed." Imagine a life where every day is approached with openness rather than assumption. Where instead of saying, "I've seen it all," you whisper, "I wonder what I'll see today." That is the path of awakening. That is what keeps the heart supple and the soul ageless. Even in your final years, learning does not abandon you. The last great lesson life offers is the art of letting go, of attachments, of identity, of form. Death itself is the ultimate teacher, revealing that nothing truly ends, only transforms. Those who have spent their lives learning are not afraid of that lesson. They recognize it as the final chapter in the greatest book ever written, the book of being. So keep learning. Learn to listen when silence speaks. Learn to see the divine in the ordinary. Learn to forgive the person you were, and to meet the person you are becoming with kindness. Learn to bow to what you do not understand. Learn to love what is, even when it doesn't make sense. The more you learn, the more you realize how vast life is, how small the ego's worries are, and how miraculous it is just to be aware. There is no graduation from this path, only deeper understanding, softer steps, and greater compassion. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, an old Zen teacher was asked what he had learned after 90 years of meditation. He closed his eyes and said, "That I know nothing, and that nothing is enough." To let go of the idea that learning ends is to let go of the idea that you are finished. You are not finished. You are still unfolding, still discovering, still learning how to see. And in that realization, you become infinite, not in years, but in spirit. So the next time you feel the world shrinking, open a book, take a walk, ask a question, plant a seed, learn a name, try something that scares you. Let curiosity be your prayer. Let wonder be your teacher. Because the moment you stop learning, you stop living. But the moment you open your mind again, truly open it, without judgment, without expectation, life rushes back in like air, after a long breath, held too tightly. Part 7. Let go of regret and forgive yourself. There are hours that arrive without warning, those quiet, sleepless moments when the world is still, and memory walks back in like an uninvited guest. The night air feels heavier, the clock louder. You lie there replaying the words you wish you hadn't said, the choices you wish you hadn't made, the paths you wish you'd taken. Regret has a strange way of disguising itself. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, soft but relentless, like the echo of a storm long gone but never forgotten. Everyone carries something they wish they could undo. Maybe it's the person you hurt without meaning to. Maybe it's the dream you abandoned because fear spoke louder than faith. Or maybe it's the version of yourself you left behind, the one who trusted too easily, who loved too deeply, who didn't yet understand how fragile time is. Regret lives in all of us, yet it weighs most heavily on those who have begun to understand just how short life truly is. We often mistake regret for morality, as though feeling pain over the past is proof that we've grown. But guilt alone is not growth, it is a cage. It traps you in a moment that no longer exists. True growth comes from compassion for others, yes, but especially for yourself. Buddhism teaches that compassion must begin within. You, yourself, as much as anyone in the universe, deserve your love and affection. Yet this is the teaching most of us resist. We can forgive others with time, but ourselves, that's the mountain we struggle to climb. We replay mistakes as though reliving them might somehow rewrite the ending. We cling to pain because, somewhere deep inside, we believe we deserve it. But pain does not purify, understanding does. Imagine your life as a river. The current moves forward, carrying everything along: memories, joys, losses, mistakes. Regret is what happens when you try to swim backward. You exhaust yourself fighting the natural flow of time, forgetting that every drop of water, no matter how muddied, still flows toward the ocean of forgiveness. There is a story told in the monasteries of Chiang Mai. A woman once came to a teacher in tears, confessing that in her youth, she had betrayed someone's trust and could not forgive herself even decades later. The teacher listened silently, then led her to the river. "Pick up a handful of water," he said. She did. "Now squeeze it tight." The water slipped through her fingers, leaving her hands empty. "The past," he said, "is like this. The tighter you hold, the less you have. The moment you open your hand, you are free. Forgiveness is not about erasing what happened. It's about releasing your grip on it. It's about understanding that the person you were then is not the person you are now. The one who made those mistakes was still learning how to see. And if you look back honestly, you'll find that every wrong turn still carried you somewhere you needed to go." Regret is the voice that says, "You should have known better." But wisdom replies, "You couldn't have." You cannot hold your younger self to the standards of the person you've become. Growth itself is the evidence that you have already repented, already transformed. Think of how tenderly we forgive a child who stumbles while learning to walk. We do not scold them for falling. We reach out our hands and say, "Try again." That same mercy is what we owe ourselves. Each mistake was a lesson disguised as pain. Each regret is a reminder that you were trying, that you cared, that you were human. But to truly forgive yourself, you must let go of the illusion of control. You must accept that the past unfolded as it needed to, not as you wanted it to. Every choice, even the ones that broke your heart, brought you here, to this understanding, to this clarity, to this chance to begin again. There is a peculiar kind of grief that lingers for the lives we didn't live. The what-ifs, the if-onlys, the ghosts of paths untaken. But look closer. The person who mourns those lost possibilities is the same person who learned from them. Without those detours, you would not possess the depth you do now. Without loss, you would not have learned to cherish. Without mistakes, you would not have learned humility. Life is not a straight line, it's a spiral. We revisit the same lessons in deeper and deeper ways until we understand them fully. What you regret today may one day reveal itself as the doorway to your awakening. The relationship that ended may have taught you compassion. The opportunity you missed may have protected you from something unseen. The failure you still ache over may have forced you to discover strength you didn't know you had. In Buddhism, there is the concept of karma, often misunderstood as punishment. But karma is not about retribution, it is about reflection. It's the echo of energy returning, not to harm, but to teach. And once the lesson is learned, the cycle ends. The moment you forgive yourself, you break the chain. The past no longer defines you, it becomes part of your wisdom. Forgiveness is an act of courage. It means facing your own reflection and saying, I will no longer punish you for being human. It means replacing judgment with understanding. You may not be able to change what happened, but you can change how it lives inside you. Close your eyes and picture the person you were at the moment of your greatest mistake. See their face, their fear, their confusion. Then whisper to them what they needed to hear. You did the best you could. And I forgive you. Feel the weight begin to lift. That's the sound of the river carrying your pain away. In many ways, forgiveness is a form of death and rebirth. Something old must die, the story of who you thought you were, the identity tied to guilt and shame, so that something new can live. That new self is lighter, clearer, more compassionate. There's a temple in northern Thailand where monks write people's burdens on thin pieces of rice paper and set them afloat in the river during a festival of light. The paper dissolves in the water, vanishing almost instantly. When one visitor asked why the ritual was so short-lived, a monk replied, because freedom doesn't need time. It only needs willingness. You don't need decades to forgive yourself. You only need this moment, this breath to say, enough. Enough punishing. Enough replaying. Enough believing that suffering makes you righteous. You can keep your lessons without keeping the pain. You can honor the past without being owned by it. Self-forgiveness is not a single act but a daily practice. Each morning, choose gentleness over guilt. When your mind drags you back into old memories, greet them like familiar travelers and say, thank you for reminding me, but I no longer live there. With each repetition, the past loosens its grip, and the present becomes a little clearer. And as the years unfold, you will find that forgiveness opens not only your heart but your eyes. You will begin to see others through the same lens of compassion you've learned to offer yourself. The world softens when you do. The harsh judgments fade, replaced by understanding. You realize that everyone is doing their best with what they know, just as you did. In that recognition, bitterness dissolves into empathy. The wounds that once separated you from others become bridges of connection. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin asking, what can I learn from this? That shift, subtle, profound, is liberation. When you forgive yourself, life becomes lighter. Colors seem brighter, air feels cleaner, moments more vivid. You no longer move through your days carrying invisible chains. You walk freely, open to what life still has to offer. Because the truth is, you are not finished. The past shaped you, yes, but it does not define you. You are still unfolding, still becoming, still capable of joy. There will be days when regret tries to return, knocking gently on the door of your mind. Do not slam it shut. Open it, smile, and say, I remember you. Thank you for your lessons. But I have moved on. Then watch as it fades like mist in morning sunlight. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is remembering without the poison. It is transforming pain into wisdom, guilt into grace, and shame into understanding. And perhaps, when your final days come, you will look back not with sorrow, but with a tender smile. You will see that everything, every heartbreak, every mistake, every moment of regret was simply life trying to love you into awareness. So let go of regret. Forgive yourself not because you have to, but because you deserve to be free. The world needs more hearts that have made peace with their own. Part 8. The peace of simplicity. There comes a point in life when you realize that most of the noise around you was never yours to begin with. The world has taught you to collect things, achievements, identities, expectations until your days feel full, but your spirit feels crowded. You once thought that peace would come from abundance, from having more, being more, proving more. But now, in the stillness of maturity, you begin to see the truth. Peace does not come from adding, it comes from subtracting. Simplicity is not about owning less, it's about needing less. It is the art of returning to what matters, the gentle act of unburdening yourself from the unnecessary. Somewhere along the way, life becomes a storage room filled with memories we no longer visit, possessions we no longer use, emotions we no longer need. We cling to them out of habit, afraid that without them, we might vanish. But the paradox of simplicity is that the less you hold on to, the more vividly you begin to exist. There was a time when you believed that happiness was hidden inside something. You didn't yet have the next promotion, the next purchase, the next adventure. And for a fleeting moment, each acquisition offered a thrill. But the satisfaction always faded, leaving behind a quiet emptiness, a whisper that said, "This isn't it." You filled that silence with more distractions, more goals, more noise. Until one day, exhaustion became your teacher. The Buddha once said, "Attachment is the root of suffering." He did not mean only emotional attachment, he meant attachment to clutter, to status, to stories we tell ourselves about what makes a good life. Every time we cling to something impermanent, we create tension between the truth of what is and the illusion of what we wish it to be. Simplicity is the courage to release that tension. Imagine a small cabin deep in the Vermont woods, its walls lined with nothing but a wooden table, a teapot, and a single chair. Outside, the snow falls gently, erasing all sound. Inside, a candle burns quietly, and the only thing you hear is the rhythm of your breath. You sit there and realize you are not missing anything. You are complete, simply because you are here. That is the peace of simplicity. It is not poverty, it is freedom. It is the moment when you stop reaching outward and begin listening inward. When you no longer need the world to validate your worth, you discover how weightless life can feel. For much of our lives, we are conditioned to measure success by accumulation, the size of our house, the number of our possessions, the weight of our achievements. But the heart does not thrive on more, it thrives on meaning. A smaller life, lived with awareness, carries more abundance than a life filled with distractions. The simplest meal shared with love nourishes more deeply than a feast consumed in haste. The smallest gesture of kindness, offered sincerely, ripples further than grand acts performed for recognition. In an old monastery outside Kyoto, monks follow a ritual known as samu, the meditation of daily tasks. Sweeping the floor, polishing a bowl, tending to the garden, each act is done with full attention. There is no rush to finish, no craving for praise. The act itself is the prayer. The mind grows still through repetition, and the ordinary becomes holy. That is the secret simplicity offers, the sacred hidden inside the mundane. When you live simply, time slows down. You begin to notice the scent of rain, the warmth of sunlight on your hands, the pattern of shadows on the wall. You begin to understand that the moments you used to overlook were the very ones that made life real. Simplicity does not remove richness, it reveals it. But letting go of excess is not only about material things. It is about uncluttering the mind, the endless to-do lists, the grudges we keep alive, the comparisons that suffocate joy. The heaviest clutter is often invisible. We carry it in our thoughts, in our restlessness, in our inability to just be. There is a kind of peace that arises only when you stop trying to fix everything. When you accept that the dishes will never all be washed, the emails never all answered, the world never all understood. Peace begins where perfection ends. Simplicity also means learning to say no with kindness, but with conviction. Every yes given to something that doesn't align with your soul is a small betrayal of your own peace. You cannot fill your days with obligations and expect serenity to find space. Life becomes lighter the moment you realize you are allowed to live gently, without apology. In the modern world, simplicity has become an act of rebellion. To slow down in a culture that worships speed is revolutionary. To find contentment in enough is an act of quiet courage. But it is precisely this rebellion that restores balance. Think of a field after harvest, bare and open. It looks empty, yet beneath the surface, the soil rests and renews itself. Simplicity is like that field, a pause that allows your spirit to regenerate. When I traveled once to a mountain village in Nepal, I met a woman who had never left her small community. Her home was modest, a single room with a clay stove, a few bowls, and a bed made of woven reeds. Yet when she smiled, it was as if the whole sky opened. Her joy was disarming. When I asked her what made her so happy, she said, "Because I have what I need. And what I need fits in my hands." Those words followed me for years. What I need fits in my hands. How many of us can say the same? We spend our lives chasing what we cannot hold: more money, more praise, more security, forgetting that peace is found in the ability to stop grasping. Simplicity is not about stripping life of beauty. It's about seeing beauty without needing to own it. The sunset doesn't last, yet it's no less breathtaking. The flower wilts, yet it's no less divine. Simplicity teaches us to love things in their impermanence, to hold lightly, to let go gently, to appreciate without clinging. Sometimes, the journey toward simplicity begins with a single act of letting go. You open a closet and give away what you no longer wear. You delete the photos that only remind you of pain. You clear the desk, not just of papers but of the pressure to be someone you're not. Each small release creates space not just in your home, but in your heart. And as space opens, peace enters. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You begin to trust that stillness is not emptiness. It is clarity. You start to realize that most of what you chased was noise designed to distract you from yourself. The quiet you once feared becomes your sanctuary. There's a gentle joy in doing less and noticing more. In savoring the way tea steams in the cold air. In listening to someone speak without planning what you'll say next. In ending the day not with exhaustion, but with gratitude. Simplicity turns every act into meditation, every breath into prayer. To live simply is to remember that nothing external was ever meant to complete you. The more you declutter your world, the more you begin to see the truth of your own sufficiency. You have always been whole. Peace was never lost, it was buried beneath layers of excess possessions, responsibilities, expectations, fear. The process of simplicity is simply the process of remembering who you are beneath all of that. There's a story told of a Zen master who was visited by a scholar seeking enlightenment. The scholar spoke endlessly of his knowledge, his readings, his theories. Finally, the master poured him tea until it overflowed, spilling onto the table. The scholar cried out, "Stop! The cup is full." The master smiled gently and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions. How can I show you truth until you empty your cup?" To live simply is to empty your cup of pride, of clutter, of endless striving. It is to make room for life itself to pour in. Simplicity is not withdrawal from the world. It is deeper participation in it. When your mind is quiet, you begin to see the sacred in ordinary things: the kindness of a stranger, the rhythm of your breath, the miracle of being alive. Peace arises not because life has become perfect, but because you have. Perfect in your presence, in your awareness, in your acceptance. In this still, simple way of living, gratitude becomes your natural language. You start to thank the world not for what it gives, but for what it allows you to experience. And slowly, you realize that the truest abundance is not what fills your shelves, but what fills your heart. Simplicity doesn't mean you own nothing. It means nothing owns you. You may still have responsibilities, relationships, dreams, but they no longer define you. They become parts of your life, not weights you carry. You learn to hold them gently, to love them without possession, to let them change as you change. Eventually, you come to see that simplicity is not a lifestyle, but a consciousness. It is not about how your home looks, but how your heart feels. When you strip away the excess, you uncover a peace so steady that even chaos cannot shake it. There is a quiet elegance in enough. Enough food to share, enough money to live, enough love to give, enough awareness to see the divine in everything. Beyond that, more adds nothing of value. So as you move forward, ask yourself, what can I release today? What noise can I silence? What burden can I set down? And when you do, notice how much lighter the air feels, how much clearer your thoughts become. Simplicity is not an end, it is a beginning the return to yourself, unburdened and whole. It is standing in the midst of a noisy world and choosing, deliberately, to live quietly. It is knowing that peace was never something to earn, only something to allow. Part 9. Let go of control. Embrace flow. For most of our lives, we are taught that control is safety. From the first moment we learn to walk, we are told to plan, to prepare, to hold on tightly to the things that matter. We cling to order, to schedules, to the illusion that if we can just manage everything, our relationships, our health, our time, then somehow life will obey us. But life, in its quiet wisdom, never does. It moves like water, not iron. And when you try to cage water, it finds its way through the cracks. The truth we spend decades avoiding is that control is an illusion. The more we tighten our grip, the more we suffer. You can organize your days to perfection, only to have the unexpected arrive: a phone call in the middle of the night, a loss that rearranges your world, a change you didn't choose. And in that moment, all your plans, all your certainty, dissolve. Letting go of control is not about apathy or weakness. It is about learning to trust the current of life itself. It is about realizing that peace comes not from bending reality to your will, but from flowing with it. The Buddha taught that attachment, whether to things, people, or outcomes, is the root of suffering. Control is attachment disguised as strength. We grasp at permanence in a world that was never meant to be permanent. There is a Japanese saying, "Nana karobe aya oki," fall 7 times, stand up 8. But what if, sometimes, standing up is not what life asks of you? What if the lesson is to lie down in the river and let it carry you? Control teaches us to resist. Surrender teaches us to trust. Imagine standing in a forest after heavy rain. The river is swollen, fierce, unstoppable. You have 2 choices: you can fight the current and exhaust yourself, or you can let it take you, knowing it will lead you where you need to go. Control whispers, swim harder. Wisdom whispers, let go. The paradox of surrender is that it doesn't make you weaker, it makes you whole. When you stop forcing life to meet your expectations, you discover a deeper rhythm underneath the chaos. You begin to see that the universe has its own design, one that doesn't require your interference. There was once a man who spent his life building plans for his future. Every goal was mapped, every step measured. He was disciplined, organized, and proud of his precision. But one day, his company closed, and his plans crumbled like paper in fire. For weeks, he fought against despair, unable to accept the change. Then one morning, he walked to the edge of the ocean and sat there, staring at the endless waves. He realized that no wave ever fought to stay on the shore. Each one came, lived its moment, and returned to the sea. That day, he stopped making plans and started making peace. To live in flow is to understand that not everything needs to be held. You can love someone deeply and still let them walk their path. You can work hard toward a goal and still accept that the outcome may not match your dream. You can prepare for the future while remaining rooted in the present. Flow is not passivity, it is active participation in life without resistance. In Buddhism, there is the concept of wu-wei effortless action. It means to act in harmony with the natural order, not against it. It is the art of doing without grasping, moving without forcing, living without fear. The great rivers don't push their way through the land. They find the path of least resistance and still reach the ocean. We live in an age obsessed with control. We control our images, our narratives, even our emotions. We post curated fragments of our lives, editing away the raw truth of who we are. We mistake perfection for peace. Yet every effort to control only deepens our anxiety. The more we manipulate life, the more alien it feels. Surrender doesn't mean letting go of responsibility. It means letting go of illusion. It means acknowledging that you cannot manage the wind, but you can adjust your sails. It means understanding that control may create order, but trust creates peace. When you surrender, something miraculous happens, your world begins to expand. The people you love feel lighter around you. You stop trying to change them, and they start to bloom in your acceptance. You begin to listen more deeply, to act more intuitively, to feel more alive. Life becomes a dance rather than a battle. Think of all the energy you've spent trying to control outcomes that were never yours, to control the way people see you, the way time moves, the way love unfolds. Now imagine what that energy could become if it were freed. That is what flow feels like, a deep exhale after years of holding your breath. There was a woman who lost everything in a fire: her home, her possessions, the pieces of her past. When I met her years later, she spoke not of loss but of liberation. "The fire took what I thought I needed," she said, "and left me with what I actually am." That is the power of release. Sometimes the universe takes what you cannot let go of, and though the process feels cruel, it is always merciful in the end. Letting go of control does not mean you stop caring. It means you start trusting. It means understanding that you are part of something larger, something that has been guiding you long before you began trying to guide yourself. When you live in flow, coincidences begin to look like choreography. The right people appear at the right time. The closed doors lead to unexpected paths. You begin to see that what you once called mistakes were simply detours crafted by life to bring you home. We often confuse surrender with defeat, but they are not the same. Defeat is the end of resistance, because you have no choice. Surrender is the end of resistance, because you finally understand you never needed to fight. It is the highest form of wisdom to stop struggling against the nature of things. The river does not apologize for its bends. The wind does not question its direction. And yet, both reach their destination effortlessly. When you stop controlling, you start living in that same grace. You realize that peace is not found in mastery over life, but in intimacy with it. Control often comes from fear, the fear of uncertainty, of loss, of pain. But fear itself is born from misunderstanding. You are not separate from the world. You are part of its unfolding. The same force that causes the trees to shed their leaves in autumn is the force that asks you to let go of what no longer serves you. Nature is your teacher. Watch how it surrenders without despair, how it trusts the cycle of return. Try this: close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine the parts of your life you're gripping tightly. perhaps a relationship, a plan, an image of who you think you must be. Now, with your exhale, imagine opening your hands. Feel the weight lift. That is surrender. That is the beginning of peace. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he didn't conquer enlightenment. He allowed it to arrive. His awakening came not from effort, but from release. In that stillness, he realized that suffering ends when resistance ends. Control is resistance. Flow is acceptance. To embrace flow is to enter into partnership with the universe. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" You stop wrestling with time and start dancing with it. The rhythm of life becomes your rhythm. And once you've tasted that harmony, even pain transforms. You see that grief, too, flows through the same river as joy, that both are necessary, both sacred. You stop labeling experiences as good or bad and begin to understand them as simply part of the whole. You were never meant to control the tide, only to learn how to move with it. The waves will come whether you resist or not. The only choice you have is whether you will drown in struggle or float in trust. And when you finally let go, when you release the illusion that you must manage every detail, fix every problem, predict every outcome, you discover that life takes care of itself. It always has. You just weren't still enough to notice. Surrender is not the loss of power. It is the discovery of true power, the kind that doesn't dominate but aligns, the kind that doesn't demand but listens, the kind that doesn't control but creates. So, when life pulls you in directions you don't understand, when plans fall apart and uncertainty looms, remember the river. Remember that even the most turbulent current eventually finds calm. And so will you. Peace was never about getting everything under control. It was about realizing that everything is already moving as it should. You don't need to push the current, you only need to trust it. Part X, the final letting go. Surrender to peace. There is a silence that arrives only after you have walked through every storm, every loss, every illusion of control. It does not announce itself with trumpets or revelation. It comes softly, like dawn light spilling through the cracks of a worn window. It comes when the soul, tired of fighting, tired of proving, simply whispers, "I am ready." Ready to release, ready to rest, ready to return home. The final letting go is not about leaving this life, it is about awakening fully within it. It is the moment when striving falls away, and what remains is presence. It is when the heart, once fractured by regret, expectation, and longing, begins to beat not with urgency but with grace. For all our searching, all our running, all our yearning, the peace we sought was never elsewhere. It was always here, beneath the noise of our becoming. Throughout the years, we spend so much of our lives trying to arrive somewhere, some destination of success, enlightenment, or love. But the truth is, every arrival is just another beginning, and every ending another door. The deeper journey is not outward but inward. The final surrender is not about giving up on life, it is about giving yourself completely to it. When you reach this place, you no longer demand that life meet your conditions. You stop arguing with reality. The mind, once full of shoulds and if onlys, grows quiet. You understand that nothing has gone wrong. Every detour, every heartbreak, every delay was simply life unfolding as it needed to. You see the perfection in imperfection, the pattern in what once felt like chaos. There is an ancient teaching in Zen that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The meaning is simple, yet profound. Peace does not change what you do, it changes how you see. The tasks remain, but the struggle disappears. You begin to live in rhythm with what is. You no longer seek escape from the ordinary, because you finally recognize it as sacred. In the mountains of Tibet, there is a small monastery known for its practice of Mahamudra. The Great Seal, the state of total acceptance, of seeing reality exactly as it is. When a student once asked the teacher how to find this state, the teacher smiled and said, "Stop trying to find it. You are already in it." The student was confused. "But I feel restless, full of thought, full of desire." The teacher replied, "And yet, awareness of that restlessness is already peace." The final surrender is not a grand act. It is a gentle falling back into what has always been true. It is remembering that you are not the waves of thought, not the stories you tell yourself, not even the name or form you inhabit. You are the ocean itself, vast, timeless, still. To reach this state, life will often strip away everything that distracts you from it. The possessions, the ambitions, the identities you clung to for meaning, they begin to lose their weight. You realize that freedom does not come from addition, but from subtraction, from shedding every layer that is not you. And yet, this surrender does not make life smaller. It makes it infinite. Because when you stop clutching, you begin to notice the quiet miracles. The way light reflects on a window pane, the laughter of children in a park, the steady rhythm of your own breath. You begin to understand that joy was never meant to be chased. It was meant to be noticed. For most of our lives, we confuse surrender with defeat. We think letting go means losing control, losing identity, losing purpose. But surrender is not the end of engagement. It is the beginning of alignment. It is when your actions no longer spring from fear, but from love. When your words no longer aim to impress, but to connect. When your days are no longer spent managing life, but meeting it, moment by moment. You start to realize that every moment of resistance was an attempt to deny the truth of impermanence. We want love to stay, health to last, youth to remain. We want certainty in a world that breathes change. But peace comes only when we stop trying to hold the river still. When we let it flow and allow ourselves to flow with it. There was a woman who spent years meditating, seeking enlightenment. She traveled across temples, read countless sutras, sat in silence for weeks at a time. But peace never came. One day she was sitting by a lake, watching a leaf float across the water. A breeze blew, the leaf turned, and in that instant, she felt something shift inside her. "It's all moving," she whispered. "It's always been moving." And for the first time, she stopped fighting the flow. In her stillness, she became the movement. That was her awakening, not an explosion, but a quiet dissolving. The final letting go is the recognition that you were never separate from life. You are not the observer standing outside of it. You are the very pulse of existence itself. When you understand this, you stop fearing loss, because you see that nothing was ever truly yours to lose. Every person you have loved, every moment you have lived, every breath you have taken, all of it was borrowed from eternity and will return there. And yet, knowing this does not bring sadness, it brings awe. To exist, even for a brief while, in this endless universe is the greatest wonder of all. To touch another soul, to share a sunrise, to breathe in and out, these are sacred acts. When you surrender to peace, you begin to live as though every breath is a prayer of gratitude. This surrender also changes the way you relate to others. You stop demanding that people understand you or meet your expectations. You begin to see them not as extensions of your story, but as travelers on their own sacred journey. You forgive more easily because you recognize the shared struggle of being human. You love without ownership, and that love becomes vast, no longer conditional, no longer fragile. The greatest paradox of this surrender is that it brings you closer to life, not further away. You don't float above the world in detachment. You enter it fully, but without clinging. You laugh more easily, cry more freely, listen more deeply. Everything becomes simpler, because you no longer resist what is. When you finally surrender, even death loses its shadow. You see it not as an ending, but as another rhythm in the eternal song of being. You understand that just as the ocean does not mourn each wave that returns to it, the universe does not mourn what passes, it simply continues, endlessly, gracefully, without judgment. In the final chapters of life, many people look back and see that all the things they feared were not enemies but teachers. The heartbreak that shattered them taught them compassion. The loss that emptied them taught them gratitude. The uncertainty that frightened them taught them faith. Everything that once felt like chaos was simply life reshaping them into wisdom. Peace, then, is not something you acquire. It is what emerges when there is nothing left to fight. It is the quiet behind every sound, the stillness beneath every movement. It is the moment when the self dissolves, and what remains is love, pure, boundless, unconditioned. If you listen closely, you may hear that love even now in the wind rustling through trees, in the laughter of strangers, in your own heartbeat. It was never gone. You were simply too busy holding on to hear it. Letting go is not a single act. It is a way of living. It is waking each morning with open hands, ready to receive what life gives and release what it takes. It is trusting that whatever leaves was never meant to stay, and whatever stays was never meant to leave. It is walking through the world lightly, with gratitude instead of grasping, wonder instead of worry. One day, when you have surrendered enough, when you have softened into the rhythm of life, you will find yourself standing in the middle of an ordinary day, perhaps washing dishes, or sitting under a tree, and you will suddenly realize that peace has arrived. Not as an idea, not as a distant goal, but as the quiet presence within you. You will smile, not because everything is perfect, but because everything belongs. This is the final letting go, the surrender that is not loss, but liberation. The peace that does not come from understanding life, but from becoming one with it. And if you've felt that stillness stir somewhere within you as you've read these words, know this peace has already begun to reveal itself in you. You don't have to chase it, earn it, or deserve it. You only have to allow it. So let the waves move. Let the days unfold. Let the heart open and close and open again. You are not falling apart, you are falling into place. And in that place, beyond all striving, beyond all fear, beyond even the idea of self, there is only peace. Eternal, effortless, whole. In the quiet unfolding of these 10 reflections, one truth reveals itself with unwavering clarity: life, in all its beauty and impermanence, was never meant to be conquered, it was meant to be embraced. We spend our early years chasing meaning, searching for love, clinging to what we believe will bring us happiness. We strive to control, to possess, to perfect. Yet, as the years pass, we begin to see that the peace we have been seeking was never hidden in the distance. It was resting within us, patiently waiting beneath the noise of wanting. Each part of this journey has been a step toward remembrance. We learned that letting go of painful relationships is not betrayal but liberation, that love, when pure, never demands our suffering. We saw that aging is not a slow fading into irrelevance, but a blossoming into wisdom. We discovered that comparison blinds us to the miracle of now, that happiness does not depend on others, and that learning continues for as long as we have breath. We faced our regrets and realized that forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, is the deepest act of compassion. We uncovered the serenity of simplicity, the freedom of surrendering control, and finally, the profound stillness of ultimate peace, the kind that no circumstance can disturb. To live fully, we must understand that letting go is not losing. It is making space for joy, for love, for the quiet grace of simply being. Every moment of release is an act of trust. Every act of trust is a step closer to peace. This is the heart of the Buddhist way to see clearly, to love gently, to live lightly, and to die without fear. And yet, these lessons are not meant to remain as words on a page or whispers in your ear. They are meant to be lived. You do not need to travel to distant temples or sit in silence for months to begin. Start where you are. Begin by softening your grip on the small things, the grudges, the expectations, the self-judgments that weigh you down. When a thought of regret rises, smile at it and let it pass. When fear of the future tightens your chest, take one deep breath and remember the present moment is already enough. When you feel the urge to chase more, pause and look around you. Already stand in the abundance of life itself. Peace is not found in perfection, but in presence. It's in the act of washing your hands slowly, feeling the warmth of water. It's in forgiving someone who may never apologize. It's in waking each day and choosing gratitude instead of complaint. The practice is simple, but not easy. It asks that we stop running from what is, and instead meet it with open arms. This is the final invitation of this journey, to let life move through you, rather than trying to hold it still. To trust that every ending is also a beginning. To know that beneath the noise, the rushing, the longing, there is a stillness untouched by time, untouched by loss. That stillness is your true home. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which part of this journey spoke to your heart the most? What lesson will you carry into your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below so we can grow and reflect together as a mindful community. And if this message has touched your soul or reminded you of something beautiful within yourself, please subscribe to Buddhism in every moment. Your support helps us continue creating heartfelt stories and reflections that awaken, heal, and inspire. Let us keep walking together, one breath, one lesson,